the real pain of this dispute is close to the surface.
Well, you've got families who have gone bankrupt. You've got families who wives have left their husbands because they can't deal with it anymore. There's a case, I don't even know whether it's connected, but a family left town and having to leave their 18-year-old son behind. Well, he committed suicide.
For the rest of Australia, the Gordonstone dispute means little or nothing, but it has dominated the industrial landscape of this part of Queensland in a way that few disputes have before or since. At the height of the dispute, 80 police battled with dozens of picketers to clear the roadway. Union officials and delegates were arrested and court injunctions prevented them returning. The mine's owner, American company Arco, wanted to do away with antiquated and unproductive work practices in a heavily unionised industry, and tried to do that by simply sacking all its workers, more than 300 of them, and replacing them with non-union staff. The astonishing thing, however, is that the Gordonstone dispute began several months before the waterfront dispute, and it's still going today.
In the case of the waterfront, it was a very, very public dispute. We had many, many people coming out in support of them. In the case of Gordonstone, it's very difficult to get to that isolated community, so you don't get the same sort of sensational viewing or indeed sensational reporting that you could get with the waterfront dispute.
Like the Maritime Union on the waterfront, the CFMEU, the coal mining union, had its share of victories. Arco was found to have unfairly dismissed its workers and forced to pay compensation.
They didn't believe in a fair go. I mean, as soon as they had the opportunity to sack their workforce, they did it.
But Arco sold the mine to a new owner, Rio Tinto, rather than re-employ the sacked workers. Rio Tinto is now reopening the mine with new staff under a non-union agreement. And so the battle continues in the federal court and on the picket line.
We had a legal agreement, a legal document signed by both parties, signed by us, signed by the company. They couldn't work around that.
The picket line may be almost deserted outside Gordonstone these days, but 50 kilometres away in Emerald, the union says a large number of sacked workers are eking out an existence and waiting.
We hope to have this decision come down in our favour and we'll be able to return to work. Failing that, we have no idea what the future holds.
David Weller is typical of the sacked miners who've stayed on in Emerald, hoping to win their jobs back. He and his wife Evelyn have picked up enough work from time to time to keep the family afloat, but it's a struggle.
I was one of the original people who set up the picket line, and I spent the first night out there and with two other people. And we sat around a campfire. We didn't even have a tent in them days, and we talked about it, and we made a decision then, the three of us, that we were doing this for our kids.
Well, it wasn't real hard at the beginning because I was working full-time. Since about August last year, everything got on top of me. I lost my sister and everything. And I've put myself on antidepressants because I just couldn't cope. And I agree with David, we'll live in a tent if we have to, because we as workers have our rights to fight for what we believe. We have the right for a union to represent us.
Evelyn now spends a lot of her time drumming up support for the union cause. What makes them both particularly bitter is that David Weller was hand-picked by the management to work at Gordonstone because of his reputation and experience. He moved his family to Queensland expecting 25 years' work at the mine.
2 weeks prior to being sacked, I had a cause to come and see one of these senior management staff in the office. As I was leaving his office, he said to me, he said, "Oh, Dave, by the way, you'll be right." I turned around and I said, well, what do you mean? And he says, when we rehire in 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to have your job back. We haven't got a problem with you.
When it became clear that David wouldn't sign a non-union agreement, the job offer came to nothing. It seemed that David Weller wasn't alone in being valued for the quality of his work. In the years leading up to the sackings, the miners at Gordonstone broke a number of production records for Australian underground mines. Their performance was so good that ARCO erected this statue, together with a sign proclaiming their workers the world's best miners. When they sacked them, the statue and the sign were taken down. Insight has been told that on the orders of management, the statue was buried somewhere on the mine site.
I've got one child in counselling. I've suffered depression. Marriage, well, I think all our marriages at some time have suffered in one way or another. It's, our husbands have got no hope. It was really heartbreaking. It's Mother's Day today, and my 9-year-old, who's just gone 9, came up to me with his birthday money and he said, "Mummy, I'll take you out for lunch for Mother's Day." You know, because he knows that we don't have the money to do that today.
Maybe that's what the petition that the Gunnedah women have got going.
As the Gordonstone dispute has dragged on, the wives of the sacked miners have formed their own support group in Emerald. It meets regularly to plan fundraising events, swap stories and generally offer moral support.
We had women depressed and making rash moves because they didn't know what other moves they could make until we made the support group.
We help each other say, you know, we've had enough of that, and we're walking out, and they say, no, we've got to have a talk, and you know, so we've got to stick by the men, otherwise, I mean, tell you the truth, they're weak, they need a good woman behind them.
The role of the women of Emerald in this dispute has become so important that the union movement has decided to use them as a way of publicising the cause.
The workers united will never be defeated! The workers united will never be defeated!
A group of miners' wives and their families travelled to Sydney to take part in a demonstration at the head office of Rio Tinto, the new owner of the mine.
Give my dad back his dog. Where's the kid? Here. Here you go.
The aim was to put pressure on the company to take up the obligation and rehire the miners who were unfairly dismissed. ACTU President Jenny George joined the protest, guaranteeing a good media turnout, and the women of Emerald had their say.
Every hope we had planned for our retirement and just give our families a better life is gone.